What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson, and we are still reeling from last night's big victory by the New York Giants in the first round of the 2023 NFL Draft, taking cornerback Deonte Banks out of Maryland. This is a player that I was really high on, that I really wanted to see the Giants grab. So did Alex, and of course, that's who they got. So we're very happy, but now we're heading into day two, and there's a lot of talent still left on the board. A few of these teams in the first round really took some day two, maybe even arguably day three players in the first round. So now there's a bunch of round one and round two prospects for the taking in the second round. The Giants have expressed an interest in maybe trading up in the second round to get closer to the top of the round, maybe take some of those players. But we kind of want to discuss 5 prospects that we think would be a good fit for the New York Giants on day two, whether that be in the second round or the third round. There's 5 players in particular that really stand out as being big fits, perfect fits with the New York Giants. So we're going to go ahead and break all of those players down. But before we do, make sure to leave a like if you do enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. But without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And what is the first player that you're really looking into as a top target for the Giants on day two?
Well, to start off with, waking up this morning felt really good. Still very confident in our selection, Deonte Banks. If you didn't really watch our episode last night, you were caught up in a lot of the excitement. This is one of the best athletes in this draft class, right? He had the highest athletic score of any cornerback in the draft class and the highest athletic score, the 4th highest athletic score at the position in the last decade, guys. Last 10 years. 4th highest. This dude is not only a great cornerback, he's got the athletic profile that fits Wink Martindale's system to a T. And another really, really cool thing about him, he's a ridiculously great tackler. On the boundary, he's going to make some plays out there. He's going to help out in the run game. He's going to be really aggressive for us, and this is a really nice selection. Deonte Banks, being a Giant, especially with all the receivers we have to face off in 2023, certainly a really valuable pick, and quarterbacks are always good to take in the first round, especially ones at 25 with CB1 upside. You don't really find those guys that late in the draft all the time. But looking ahead to day two, we have the second and third rounds, and the Giants have the 57th overall pick and the 80th overall pick. So we have a lot of opportunity here to go out and make some moves. We can really find some good value selections. And the first guy I want to start off with is center, because you watched the Eagles yesterday. Right when you think the Giants are making good progress, the Eagles have a ridiculous draft. They get Jalen Carter. And what's the other guy's name? Nolan Smith. The ridiculous players to bolster their defensive line, and they just continuously get better. It's pissing me off. The Giants can't take a step forward that the Eagles taking 5 ahead of the rest of the NFL. We just need Patrick Mahomes to keep beating them in the Super Bowl, or the Giants to step up and Daniel Jones to have a ridiculous season and really drag us there. That'd be awesome too. But right now, the Giants need to be thinking, okay, we have to address 2 positions right now, wide receiver and an interior offensive line spot, because we need to be able to hold up in the NFC East against some of the best pass rushers in football, and we need to give Daniel Jones another support, another piece of the puzzle to support him, because ultimately a wide receiver core, they have a long history of injury-prone play, and ultimately we just need to get a young stud who can develop into a really solid player for us. So to start off, I'm going to go with the interior offensive line. I'm going to go with John Michael Schmitz, because there's a possibility that he drops to the 50s range. I think if he does get to that range, the Giants could think, maybe we want to trade up and get him. Maybe he's our guy. Maybe he's someone that could step in and be an average starter immediately and then develop into an above-average starter after a year of growth and time in our system with Bobby Johnson and Mike Kafka and whatnot. John Michael Schmitz is a really, really solid player, guys. He's arguably the top center on the draft board. He's at 6'3", 301 pounds, superior athlete, really great athlete. And this is a player who, he calls all the plays. He's a high football IQ, super intelligent. He'd be able to manage that offensive line really nicely and call out the pre-snap coverages, or rather just kind of help organize things in the trenches and help, solve a position that's been a weakness for us over the past couple of years. I'm tired of the John Felicianos and the Billy Prices of the world. We need a long-term solution, and John Michael Schmitz certainly fits the bill. We've talked about him quite extensively during this offseason. But Anthony, when you're looking at JMS, I know you're a big proponent of his. Do you think this would be a valuable pick if he does drop to the 50 range and the Giants say, you know what, we really like him. We think he can be a long-term solution at the position for us over the next couple of years. Obviously, it's a 4-year contract, being that it is in the second round. Really good second-level blocker, dominant in the run game, and a really, really great athlete in that respect. So I definitely think he would be a nice selection for us to shore up an important spot that we certainly don't have an answer for right now.
Yeah, listen, I've talked pretty much all offseason long about how much I like John Michael Schmitz. I do think that he's the best center in this class, and I think that he would have been a great selection for the New York Giants if they were to have traded down from 25 and into the top of the second round. But you're saying you think that he might fall all the way to 57 where the Giants are picking right now, or at least close enough to where they can make a minimal trade up to grab him. Personally, I don't think that's the case. I don't see him realistically getting past the 37th overall pick. I think that John Michael Schmitz is a player who had a really solid chance of going at the end of round one. I think that the Giants probably gave him some consideration with 25, but then of course Banks fell to 24 and they realized that they had to go up and get this player. So when you're looking at John Michael Schmitz, there are teams out there who are reportedly enamored by him. They love him. And the Seattle Seahawks are one of those teams, and they're picking at 37 overall. It wouldn't shock me in the slightest to see them go ahead and take John Michael Schmitz with that 37th overall pick. Now, again, if he ends up falling a little bit in this class, if you see John Michael Schmitz on the board around 45 and you're picking at 47, if you're the Giants, I'd try and make the move up. Try and give up maybe a future draft pick or something in the later middle rounds. If you're the Giants, to go ahead and yes, get a day one starter at the center position who can probably start there for the next 4 years. I would love to see that. I would love to see John Michael Schmitz on this team. But more realistically, I think that John Michael Schmitz goes in the top 40 picks. And so pretty much within the next 8 picks as soon as the draft starts. And I think that they will pivot and try to target a guy in Joe Tippmann. I think that Joe Tippmann is a really, really solid prospect out of Wisconsin. He has some beautiful hair. We love his mullet. And he's a mauler. He is a damn good player that I think makes more sense for the Giants at 57 overall. And potentially in the third round, we'll see where Tippmann ends up going. But he has raw power. He has athleticism. And he's a big dude. From the center position to be 6'6" is definitely rare. So when you're looking at a guy like Joe Tippmann, 6'6", 313 pounds, has a lot of power to his game, has really incredible athleticism for a guy his size. I don't know how he moves the way that he moves at 6'6", 313 pounds, but we know that the Giants love one thing in the draft: athletes. We just saw that last night with Deonte Banks. We saw that all throughout the 2022 NFL draft class. The Giants are routinely selecting guys that have a high relative athletic score. They want to go after elite athletes. And when you're looking at Joe Tippmann, this guy is an elite athlete. So I think that he also makes a lot of sense. Again, I like John Michael Schmitz, but I just don't see him realistically being an option at 57 overall. However, Joe Tippmann looks like he could be a realistic option, and the Giants could be a landing spot for him late in the second round. So, Alex, what are your thoughts on Joe Tippmann? Just this freaky, big, raw, powerful athlete out of Wisconsin.
Look, I mean, when you're looking at Tippmann, this is a huge person, a huge monster, and he has a ridiculously beautiful mullet. If you go on his NFL draft profile, this guy has the nicest head of hair. I've seen it. You draft this guy just for the hair alone. I mean, it's just absolutely gorgeous. I know you guys in the comments are, if you go and look at his NFL profile, you're going to agree with me. Thing is just a piece of, it's a statue. It's from the freaking Roman era. It's ridiculously gorgeous. But 6'6", 313 pounds, man. This is a big boy. This is a monster center. You don't find 6'6" centers very often. He's got some weight to him too. I mean, the problem with him being center and being that tall is that sometimes that lack of anchor will be there. It'll show up. He overextends, maybe a little bit too aggressive at times because he's so long and just freaking massive. But he's the number one center according to NFL in the draft class. They project him to be a plus starter. Eventually, he was the third-ranked athletic center in this draft class as well. They have him as a round 2 draft projection, but this is a 2-year starter. He's got strength. He's got athleticism. He can fit a variety of different running schemes. He can really help you in pass protection. Like I said, taller than the average center, but he has enough bend. He can do a lot of great things for you. The weaknesses seem to be more so coachable, and I think that's a good thing, right? When you look at some players, you can't make up for athletic deficiencies at times. Tippmann's got all the athletic traits you want. You could even make the argument he could transition to guard at some point in his career if they saw that they had a center that was doing really well and they could kick him over to guard. He may be a good player there because of his size. But if you look at the qualities that he kind of lacks in, it's more so like playing off balance, sometimes his shoulder level's too low, his pad level's too low. It's going to be about getting him in the right stance at the next level. It's going to be about getting him in the right situation where he's not going to be overextended and he's not going to be leaning. He's not going to be kind of towering over people, and that causes those balance issues. But if they can kind of iron those deficiencies out and they can find a way to get his shoulder level lower, get that strength behind his ridiculously large frame for a center, center, they're going to find a really great player in Joe Tippmann who could be a very nice center for a very long time. So would I like Joe Tippmann? Absolutely. I think he would be a tremendous player to grab in the second round. And I think he might be available at 57. So if the Giants don't want to go for JMS, if he's the first one off the board, keep an eye on Tippmann as a 57th overall pick so the Giants don't even have to move. But I'll bring another name into the mix to let you get your take on him first. Jonathan Mingo. This is a player we talked a lot about, Anthony, a player that a lot of people are high on right now after hearing the Giants were linked to him in recent days, right? Jonathan Mingo out of Mississippi is a tremendous player. NFL says he'll eventually be an average starter, but I think that he has that kind of Deebo Samuel look and feel to him. The guy is powerful. He's strong. He's surprisingly really, really athletic, and he's really good in the open field. He only ran a 4.46 40-yard dash, so he doesn't have like breakaway speed, but with the ball in his hands, he can do some stuff for you. Now his production wasn't overall, like it wasn't exciting to say the least at Mississippi, but I think that was more so because of deficient quarterback play. Get him a better quarterback. Daniel Jones certainly has a good arm to him. I think that we could see Mingo turn into a high-end wide receiver 2 or a low-end wide receiver 1. I think that might be where he lands, but you can use him in so many different ways. You know, we have really, really good route runner. He's got so much, like they compare him to Anquan Bolden. That's a ridiculously great comp, and I think that Anquan Bolden was an insane player. Love to get another version of him. That big, strong slot kind of presence he brings. You can kind of move him around, that muscular build. He's really fun to watch, but at the same time, there's a lot of developmental upside and ways you can utilize a player like this. He's not a possession receiver. He's not a Kenny Golladay, so don't get that mixed up. He's a really good route runner. He's got good hands. He can use that frame to his advantage. And he just, he's a solid, sturdy player. Like, that's the way I would describe him. He's not elite at anything, but he's good at everything. And I think that's kind of what you're going to get in Jonathan Mingo, a good player across the board that doesn't have that many weaknesses. And that's something that the Giants desperately need, someone that just can do it all for you at a good level. And the developmental upside is there to maybe get it to a above average level. And I think that's kind of exciting to consider. But what are your thoughts on Jonathan Mingo as a second round pick, someone that maybe the Giants have to trade up for to actually land?
Yeah, you're asking me what my thoughts are on Jonathan Mingo. Listen, this is one of my favorite prospects in the class. I love Jonathan Mingo. I think he's so underrated, and when you look at his game and what he brings to the table, there's just one player that he really reminds you of, right? If you're looking at him in that Ole Miss uniform, catching these touchdown passes, again, I know he wasn't super productive during his time at Ole Miss. However, just watch the way that he plays, and he's got that same uniform on as A.J. Brown coming out of college, and honestly, these two look really, really similar. I'm going to keep making that comparison. It's an easy comparison to make because they played at the same university. But when you're looking at Jonathan Mingo and the physicality with which he plays, it is so impressive. And he plays a lot out of the slot. He also plays out wide. I agree with you. I think this could be a wide receiver 1. Not saying he will be in year 1, but he definitely has the opportunity to develop into something truly special at the next level. Look at his relative athletic score. Okay, I'm going to keep going back to these things because there's a clear correlation for the New York Giants and the players that they draft with the relative athletic score. Now, if you're wondering, Jonathan Mingo posted a 9.87 overall relative athletic score. He had a 39.5-inch vertical jump, a 10-foot 9-inch broad jump, and his 40-yard dash for a guy who's 220 pounds to be running a 4.46 40, that's pretty damn good. With a 1.52 10-yard split, this guy's a burner. Like, he is quick. He's not one of your slower, muscular wide receivers. No, he can move. He's got some speed to his game. He posted decent times in the shuttle and 3-cone drills, but when you're looking at a guy who's 6'1", 220 pounds, puts up 22 bench press reps, that screams Anquan Bolden, A.J. Brown, these physical wide receivers who can play on the inside, play on the outside, and Mingo can also make some plays after the catch. Don't discount his ability to make some plays with the ball in his hands. I like what you said about his route running. I agree with you. I think he's a route runner who can make an impact at all 3 levels. I think he makes plays at the short, the intermediate, and the deep portions of the field. And in fact, if you look at the stats, I'm pretty sure he had a 99.9 receiving grade by PFF on deep passes, 20-plus yard receptions. He was incredible going long, and we know that that's something that the New York Giants really need in their offense. They need a receiver who could go deep, go vertical, make some receptions, and he's not just your run right by, you'll be a burner. No, he can make some physical contested catches as well, combined with his really solid speed at a 4.46 with 220 pounds of muscle. So Jonathan Mingo, man, I really love this prospect. This is a player that I would trade up for if I'm the New York Giants. Like, I really do see enormous amounts of potential here. You mentioned that his production production in college wasn't very good. No, it wasn't. But again, he was playing at Ole Miss, who have not been the best in recent years. They have a lot of struggles at the quarterback position. Their offense has undergone significant changes. It's not the same offense that A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf were a part of a few years ago, right? A lot has changed in the 4 years since those guys have entered the NFL. So now, when you're looking at this new Ole Miss offense with Jonathan Mingo, he's doing the best that he can under those circumstances. He had over 800 yards, he had 5 touchdowns, but if you watch the tape and you watch what he put on the field, rather than just looking at the stat sheet, you saw a lot more than what the stats would suggest. This is a player with true developmental potential and elite athleticism. What have the New York Giants been searching for in these past 2 drafts? Based on last night and based on last year, they're looking for developmental prospects that are elite athletes. And again, Jonathan Mingo perfectly fits that bill out of Ole Miss, and we know that the Giants love Ole Miss. That's where Eli Manning's from, so I like that connection as well. And again, the connection between A.J. Brown, Jonathan Mingo, their playing style, their physicality, and the same college that they went to, it all just makes so much sense to me. And keep in mind, Mingo, a projected second-round pick. A.J. Brown was also a second-round pick. So you can definitely find wide receiver ones in round 2, whether that be Mingo or whether that be Marvin Mims out of Oklahoma. Let's go ahead and dive into him now, Alex, and talk about another one of these wide receiver prospects that the New York Giants are really interested in. I know you've done a little bit of research on Marvin Mims in preparation because, listen, the Giants are really interested. They had him in for a top 30 visit. A lot of the beat writers are saying make sure to keep an eye on him at 57 overall. This Oklahoma receiver, he could be a top target for the Giants today. And again, like I just said, you can find wide receiver ones in round 2. It happens rather frequently in the NFL draft. You don't need to take a receiver in the first round. I know a lot of Giants fans are frustrated with the team for going corner rather than wide receiver in round 1, but listen, it's way harder to find day 1 starters at the cornerback position in the middle rounds than it is at the receiver position, because we routinely see wide receivers drafted in round 2 turn into primary receiving threats in an offense. So let's go ahead and talk about Marvin Mims. Alex, what are your thoughts on this Oklahoma wide receiver prospect?
Look, Marvin Mims is another player the Giants have been linked with recently. So Mims is cool. I like Mims because he's versatile, right? He kind of gives me like better Darius Slayton vibes, and I don't know if that's the best comp, but that's kind of the relevant one I can come to. Really, really solid athlete, 4.38, 40-yard dash, so he's got some speed to him. This is, 5'11", 183 pounds. He's got some size. He plays bigger than he is, right? He plays like he has more physicality. He's had some incredible catches. If you go watch his highlight tape, oh my God, he has some unbelievable catches at Oklahoma. Of course, we have a guy already on our roster from Oklahoma, and Sterling Shepard. Did not play together, but those Oklahoma receivers sometimes do produce some good stuff at the NFL level. But I'll tell you this right now. Mims, he can play inside and out. That's kind of what I like about him. Averaged 19.5 yards per catch in his career. He can line up all over the place. A lot of the receivers in this draft class were considered power slot or slot receivers. I think Zay Flowers is capable of moving around. Addison's also capable of being a little bit more versatile. But JSN they pigeonholed him into this slot role. A lot of these guys projected as more slot-centric receivers at the next level. But Marvin Mims is capable of going to the outside on the boundary. He's capable of attacking you from the slot, from the Z. He can do everything you need him to, and he's got great speed. And once the ball is in his hands, anything can happen. He's got a lot of potential, once you're doing that. Now, the Oklahoma system did limit his route tree quite significantly, but a lot of the scouts believe that he is going to expand that route tree very quickly at the NFL level, and he's going to do really well with it. He's going to really assimilate to this next step in his professional development, and it's going to allow him to really become a more well-rounded receiver that can attack the field with his speed. He's a great route runner. He has a really good shimmy at the stem of his routes. So that's kind of what you like to see. Now, the catch frame is a little bit limited at times, but, I don't think that's a big issue because I think Daniel Jones is pretty accurate. I don't necessarily think he throws the ball way off the mark very often. So I think when it comes to guys like Marvin Mims, the ball is going to be there. He just has to catch it. He's got that long stride like Darius Slayton, really long stride, insane speed. But I think he can do a lot better than Slayton because he's a better route runner already. And I think that his game has a lot more upside. So maybe, Slayton, who's kind of on a 1-year deal, he's on a 2-year deal, but I think there's an out. Like the money is really front loaded. I might have to check on that. I'm not totally sure about that, but even so, let's say after the deal is done, 2 years, and that contract is over, I think it was 2 years, 12 million, something of that nature. You have a player that's going to take over that speedster role with a lot more upside as a long-term solution. So you like to see that, adding him to a team. Right now, the Giants have prioritized adding a substantial amount of speed to this offense. Guys like Darren Waller, bringing back Slayton, Paris Campbell, If they went out and got a guy like Mims, you're looking at a team full of just absolute separators and speed. And that's what the Giants are trying to do. They were one of the slowest receiver units in the league last year. That's about to change big time. Mims certainly fits the bill. Mingo's a lot slower than him, so totally different players here. But I really like Mims because of his versatility, that obvious athleticism, the speed that opens up the offense for Mike Kafka and Brian Dable and really pushes the secondary, which opens up opportunities for guys like Darren Waller in the shorter to intermediate passing portions of the game.
Yeah, and you know what? You kind of mentioned somebody there, and I kind of just came up with a little bit of a comparison here. Marvin Mims reminds me a little bit of Paris Campbell, right? New York Giants just signed Paris Campbell, a speedster. Campbell ran a 4.31 40-yard dash, while Marvin Mims just ran a 4.38, which is really good, and one of the fastest 40-yard dash times in this draft class. Plus, they're both great route runners, both have the ability to go inside and outside, and both have the ability to make some pretty spectacular catches. I think that's the thing that stands out for me the most with Marvin Mims, is that he's not just your typical burner who makes over-the-shoulder receptions deep downfield. He can go up there. He's got great ball skills. He has excellent body control. He can make some Randy Moss-esque catches despite being an undersized wide receiver. And listen, size isn't everything, especially not for the New York Giants. They don't mind having undersized wide receivers as long as these receivers have speed, know how to get open, and run good routes. And I do think that is the right mindset to have when looking at wide receivers. So Marvin Mims, 5'11", 183 pounds, only has 9-inch hands. Not a big guy by any means. In fact, a very small guy. But look at Isaiah McKenzie, someone that Brian Dable really loved and kind of developed into a very quality starter in the NFL. He's also, I think, 5'8", 180 pounds with very small hands. The Giants don't mind, right? Brian Dable doesn't mind wide receivers who lack in size as long as they don't lack in speed and route running. And Marvin Mims is a great route runner. He can run routes from the inside, run routes from the outside, and he's a true vertical threat with that 4.38 speed. I really like this prospect, and again, we know that he's one of their top targets going into day 2. If the Giants walk away from this draft with Marvin Mims, I think Giants fans are going to be really happy because this is a player who adds something to the Giants offense that isn't currently there, right? Having a guy who could just stretch the defense the whole game long. I think Paris Campbell is probably going to play more of that slot role where he uses his speed underneath to kind of make plays after the catch. But when you're looking at Marvin Mims, I think he can be your big-time burner downfield, run those chair routes, run those deep posts, those post corners, all of that good stuff that the Giants don't really have someone to run at the current time. So Marvin Mims, when you're looking at him, again, just a player that I think has insane potential because of his speed. And I will go back to the relative athletic scores. I brought them up for every prospect so far. And again, it's something that the Giants clearly have a correlation to drafting with. Marvin Mims with a 9.4 relative athletic score because he had elite grades in explosion, he had great vertical and broad jumps, and he had elite grades in speed. Now, of course, he had a poor grade in size. However, size is not everything, and I think that his speed and his explosiveness is something that the Giants will definitely value from the wide receiver position. But let's also move over to the defensive side of the ball and discuss one of these prospects that we think could potentially be a target for the Giants. Maybe not the most realistic target. This might be a trade-up target, but Brian Branch out of Alabama, safety prospect who was projected to go in round 1. Now, if you all remember, a couple years ago, there was a round 1 safety prospect out of Alabama that fell out of the first round and right into the Giants' laps. That was Xavier McKinney. History could repeat itself right here with Brian Branch. Maybe the Giants look at this as a potential opportunity to fill a hole that Julian Love left behind. Obviously, Love signed with the Seattle Seahawks this offseason. And now you can maybe go ahead, repeat history here, get another Alabama defensive back in round 2 to play alongside Xavier McKinney. I'm sure that they'll instantly have good chemistry. They're both Alabama boys, and we know that McKinney is a great player who's only getting better year by year. And Brian Branch is one of those versatile prospects that not only plays that free safety, strong safety role, but also plays in the slot, kind of like Julian Love did. If you remember when Julian Love was coming out of college, he was drafted technically as a slot cornerback by the New York Giants. They moved him to safety, and that's where he made a name for himself. He played a lot of strong safety for the Giants. The Giants want McKinney to be their central midfielder, right? They just want him being that ball hawk, that single high safety, that free safety in the defense, and they are looking for a strong safety to get into the box. Brian Branch can be that player because he plays a lot in the slot. So you can move him around your defense, give him the versatility, and that's something that Wink Martindale definitely values. We know that he likes to play positionless defense with those safeties. Move them all over the formation, have them line up deep, have them line up in the box, in the slot. Brian Branch can do all of those things, so I think he would be a pretty good fit for the Giants. But Alex, when you're looking at Brian Branch and kind of his draft stock, he might go in the top 45 picks, right? So the draft might start today, 15 picks later, he's off the board. Do you think that the Giants would be willing to trade up for Brian Branch, or considering he's a safety and he's, safety position is kind of a tough one to trade up for, justify a trade up for, but is that something that you think that they should consider doing at the start of round 2?
I think the Giants need to address their offense right now. I think that their defense has some really good pieces to it, but we need offensive line support and we need a receiver. So I'd rather go with those two picks. But, Brian Branch, objectively speaking, is a tremendous prospect, right? He can do it all for you. He can play in the slot. He can play boundary corner. He can play strong safety. He can play free safety. This is the current safeties on the Giants right now. You have Xavier McKinney, who's your cemented free. You have Bobby McCain, who we brought in as a supplementary piece. Jason Pinnock, Trenton Thompson, and Dane Belton, right? I think the Giants are hoping that Dane Belton, out of Iowa last year, develops into that primary strong safety. He can play into the run game. He's really physical and powerful. The Giants didn't ask Julian Love to always cover up in man coverage, but when McKinney was out, they had him playing free safety and they had him kind of roaming the backfield there. I think they wanted to bring back Love, but he ended up getting a really good contract from Seattle. So, happy for Julian Love, one of our favorites on the podcast. We interviewed him a couple years back. Really great dude. Always a great guy on the team and in the locker room. He was a captain for a reason. So, wishing him the best as always. But supplementing that loss is a big deal. Now, again, remember, Julian Love was a 4th round pick. We don't need to draft a free safety, or rather a strong safety or a safety in general, in the 2nd round. I think we go after our center, or a guy like Osiris Torrance, who we're not going to talk about in this episode. We'll see what happens with him, but another player that we really do like as well if they wanted to go for a guard upgrade. But JMS, Joe Tippmann, Jonathan Mingo, Marvin Mims, I prefer any of those guys over Brian Branch because, one, you're going to have to trade up significantly to get Brian Branch, right? He's going to be a top 40 pick, I think. I think he goes in the first 8 picks of the 2nd round. And to move up 17 spots, you have to give up probably our 3rd and 4th round picks, which I don't think Joe Schoen wants to do. So it's unrealistic. But Brian Branch also, is also a safety, and it's not a position we necessarily need. It's not a dire need at this point in time. Interior offensive line is, and receiver is. So for those reasons, I am out, but I do love Brian Branch as a prospect, and wherever he goes, I think he's going to be a tremendous player.
As do I, and kind of just you saying that right there gave me a little bit of a freak out. I really just hope he doesn't go to Philadelphia, right? It feels like they just keep nabbing all of these players who fall in the draft. I mean, their draft yesterday was utterly insane. Nolan Smith and Jalen Carter. I mean, they're just building the Georgia Bulldogs defense right now. And of course, they could make it the SEC defense, go after Brian Branch, but I hope that doesn't happen. And again, if he does have one of those slides, like those astronomical falls down the draft board, and he is on the clock for the Giants at 57, I do think it's a prospect that they'll strongly consider taking. I know it would be kind of unconventional for the team to go defensive back in round 1, defensive back in round 2, but these two players, Deonte Banks and Brian Branch, do play very different positions. One is a true perimeter cornerback. One is a slot corner / safety. So I think that would be a great way for the Giants to really bolster the secondary and kind of build a future here on the defense that's really going to be time tested for the next 5 years or so. I think that could be a really, really nice duo to add in round 1 or 2. But of these 5 names that we mentioned, I got to say, I'm really holding out hope for Jonathan Mingo. He is my favorite prospect out of all of these players that we mentioned, but they can't go wrong. If they land John Michael Schmitz, I'm happy. Joe Tippmann, I'm happy. Brian Branch, also happy. Marvin Mims, I'm also happy. But it's going to be really exciting. Of course, we're going to hit you with our recap and reaction videos right here on the channel as soon as the pick is made. So make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and ring the bell so you do not miss an episode. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this episode. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave us a 5-star review. We will catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.